Hey YouTube, welcome back to the BladesIIB shop. Pretty quick video for you today. We're going to go ahead and talk in a little bit more detail about the heat treat process for 440C stainless, CPM154 stainless steel for heat treating knife blades. I heat treated the blade in a video the other day, that part 3 in my Triple BS knife build series, and today's video just wanted to go into a little bit more detail around the recipe behind that and how to program this Paragon knife kiln. So that's what we're going to do today. For those of you new to the channel, if you just found it because you looked up how to program this Paragon kiln, hey, would sure appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. You'll see more videos on knife making, machining, welding, everything else we have going on here in the BladesIIB shop. And for those of you already subscribed to the channel, I sure appreciate you watching all these videos. Thank you so much for that. All right, let's jump into this one. First off, we're going to go to the computer. I put together a slide. We'll talk through the recipe for heat treating 440C stainless, and then we're going to come down here. We'll actually push the buttons on the kiln and talk through how you program what's called a ramp hold sequence to do that, and we'll get that plugged in here. We'll then talk through the recipe for CPM154 stainless steel. We'll come down, we'll get that programmed in here, and we're going to go through both the heat treating formula or heat treating recipe and also the tempering recipe for both of these steels. I still have the video from that last blade that I heat treated, so you'll get to see the process of prepping the blade, getting it wrapped in its foil pouch. We're actually going to start with that, and then we'll of course fire the blade at the end, and you'll get to see a knife going in and back out of the oven for that heat treating process. So there's kind of a summary of the video. Let's go watch the piece where we're going to prep this blade and get it wrapped in its foil pouch and protected, and then we will talk through the actual recipes and the programming of this kiln. All right, I hope you enjoy the video. So the first step in our heat treating process is going to be the same regardless of whether we're using 440C or CPM154 steel, and that is we need to get our knife blade sealed up inside of a pouch so that we keep all of the oxygen off of there while we're heat treating it. As soon as your steel gets red hot, if there's oxygen there, then that's when you're going to get that black scaly finish, and we want to prevent that from happening. So using some stainless steel foil here, this foil is super sharp. Make sure you're being very, very careful when you're using this. And we're just going to fold this in half, and we're going to make a pouch to seal our knife blade in there. We want to make sure it's airtight, so for all these seams, I recommend you fold over at least 3 times to make the seams on there. So we're going to get those folded over on each end, and then we're going to have a nice pouch. The next thing we want to make sure of is we want to make sure that you're not getting any other contaminants of any kind in there. So using some acetone, make sure you clean your blade, get rid of any Sharpie marks, bluing dye, just the grease, oil, anything else you have on that blade. So make sure you take a minute to clean that up before you put it in the pouch. And then the other thing is we want to make sure that we get rid of any air that is in the pouch. So I'm going to use just some brown paper here. Get a piece about 2 inches square, fold that up, put it in there, and that is going to spontaneously combust when it gets hot, and then that's going to burn up any remaining oxygen inside the pouch to make sure we don't get any of that scaly finish. So that's pretty much the basic preparation to make sure your blade is ready. Also, just note which way it's oriented in the pouch. Make sure you have the spine down to the bottom, and it's ready to go in the kiln. Well, now that we have this ready for going in the kiln, let's talk a little bit about the kiln and our recipe that we're going to use for this. So we're going to talk through the recipe for 440C. I'm going to show you how to program that into the kiln, and then we're going to come back. We're going to look at the recipe for CPM154, and then that's what we're going to program into the kiln, since that is actually what we are heat treating today. Overall process is very similar for both. So I have a Paragon knife kiln. The knife kiln just means it's a fairly small size, doesn't have a very big opening, as you can see there. It does have a lot of depth, so you can do longer blades, and I've got the Sentry 2.0 controller on there, so that's what we're going to go take a look at here in a moment. And essentially we're just going to go input our heat treating formula or heat treating recipe into that controller so that it does that for us. 440C is a little bit simpler for the heat treatment. We're just basically, as fast as that kiln can get up to temperature, we're going to heat it up to 1875 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to soak it there for 20 minutes, and then we're going to pull it out and we're going to air quench that, and that's the whole recipe for heat treating. Again, for my kiln, just full speed ramp. So ramp 1, full speed, as fast as it can heat it up, get to 1875 degrees, soak for 20 minutes, open the door, pull it out, air quench it, and you're done. I have a second ramp set up for an additional 10 minutes, and that is because I typically do 3 blades at a time, and that extra 10 minutes is just for the opening the door in between blades, for the time it takes me to get one cooled off, get it hanging on the nail, and that way it's still trying to keep the kiln up to temperature temperature for that 5 or 10 minutes that it takes me to do all three. So that's why I've got this extra ramp set up. After the knife is heat treated, then I usually go throw it in the freezer for a week and let it sit in the freezer for a few days. I don't have a cryo, I don't have liquid nitrogen that I'm using to cool my blade, so just use the freezer for a week and then I come back and temper that. So I have another program set up on my kiln for the tempering, and that one is going to be full speed ramp up to initially 330 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm going to hold it there for 20 minutes. Got a couple options here. I could either not ramp it up at full speed, and I could ramp all the way up to 350 degrees. I could ramp full up to 350 degrees, let it sit for 30 minutes and stabilize before I put my blade in there. Because if you ramp full, when I'm ramping at full speed up to 330 degrees, it actually goes past. It goes to about 340, 342 degrees in that 20-minute time frame before it finally sort of catches up and slows down. So if I were to just ramp all the way full speed up to 350, it would blow past probably 10 to 12 degrees, which, depending on how sensitive your steel is, that may be more temper than you want out of there. So I'm trying to control it right at 350 degrees. So by following this step, I ramp it up to 330, I hold it there for 20 minutes, let the kiln fully warm up and stabilize, and then I ramp it at 100 degrees per hour for the up to the 350 degrees. So now it's taking it nice and slow for that 20 degrees in between, and then it stays plus or minus 2 degrees on that 350. Hold it there for 2 hours for my tempering. So that is basically the recipe for the heat treatment and tempering of 440C. Let's go take a look at the controller on this kiln and we'll talk through programming that. We'll come back, we'll look at the recipe for CPM154, and then we'll go back and get that programmed in the kiln or the blade we're actually going to fire today. All right, so we just talked through the recipe for 440C stainless steel, and now let's talk through how you would program that into this kiln. So as soon as you plug the kiln in, it's gonna beep, and then it's gonna go into this idle mode. That's where it is right now. You're gonna notice my temperature is currently at 344 degrees. I actually just finished doing a tempering cycle on a blade. It's in there, I've got it slowly cooling down inside the kiln right now, but that's not gonna stop us from being able to go through and take a look at the programming on this. So you turn the kiln on, and again, we're going to go through all 4 of my programs that I do for the heat treating, the tempering of the 440C, and the heat treating and the tempering of the CPM154 are both what's called a ramp hold program. And this is able to store them, so I have all 4 of those programs stored in here under user numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. You even saw that on the slide. For my ramp hold, let's just take a look at what that program looks like for the 440C stainless heat treating. So I'm going to hit my ramp hold, I'm going to go take a look at user number 1, and I'm going to hit enter. And you're going to see that that's going to show that ramp 1 that we had on the slide, and that's at full. And full just means as fast as the kiln will warm up. The way that you enter that is 9999. That is the highest temperature that you can input in there. So it's going to ramp at full and to the temperature of that 1875. So again, with the 440C, we're just going right up to that full temperature as fast as we can. So right now it's set to hold that at 20 minutes. So if I wanted to right here, if I wanted to change my program, all I would be doing is I'd punch in a different time. So I could punch in 30 minutes. And then when I hit enter, we'll come back around and we'll take a look at that. So then ramp number 2, this is where again I leave myself time to pull them out of the oven. So I've got that at the same temperature, and that's holding for 10 minutes. And then at ramp number 3, we don't have a ramp number 3, that's why it's set to 0. That lets it know you can end the program. On this kiln, user number 1, you can have up to 20 different steps. For I believe 2, 3, and 4, you can have up to 10 steps. So user, that first one gives you the ability to have a larger program. So then we get done, and then we're at idle, and that's it, we are complete. But if I go back in there, so hit my ramp hold, I go back to user 1, it's still ramped full to 1875. But now you're going to see that my hold is actually for 30 minutes. That's incorrect. I need to change that back to 20. Hit enter, and it's that simple. That's how you go through and program it. So if you have a program already in there, you're just overriding it. And if there was no program in there, it would just go through the sequence and you would just be putting in 0 at the end when you get to your last ramp. So it's that simple to program these. So there's our hold for that 10 minutes. Ramp 3, again, we are done and we're complete. So then user number 2, this is going to be the tempering for that 440C that we just looked at. So that's 330 degrees. We're going to do that at full speed. I'm going to hold it there for 20 minutes. And again, that's to normalize the kiln, make sure that it's going to hold a good solid temperature, not trying to creep past. And then ramp number 2, now instead of full, now you see that we're at 100 degrees per hour. So gonna warm up a lot slower from that 330 to the 350. And it's gonna get us to 350 degrees. And then that's gonna hold it there for 2 full hours. Ramp number 3, again, that's gonna be 0. That means that's the end of my program. And that's it. That's going to take me back to idle. So right now, if I wanted to fire program number 1, so I've turned my kiln on, I plugged it in, I go to user number 1 and hit enter. Now we make sure we're there. I like to always skim through my programs and make sure that it's good. Make sure that nothing's changed since last time I turned my kiln off. 10 minutes and then 3, we're done. Okay, so it's good. So now I'm at idle. I know that I'm on user number 1 because I just went through and looked at that, and then I would just hit enter, and that is going to start, and that would kick off the program. Just heard the kiln kick on, and now it's going to start warming back up again, which I don't actually want it to do, so I'm going to go ahead and hit stop, which is abort. That's going to end my program, and we're back to idle. Well, now that we've seen what the kiln looks like, the programming looks like, we already talked through the recipe for 440C. Very similar with CPM154, just a few extra steps in our recipe, and the programming is going to go pretty much the same as what we just went through there. For our recipe for CPM154, we're just going to do a couple of steps before we get up to our full temperature. So ramp number 1, we're still going to ramp at full speed. We're going to get up to 1200 degrees Fahrenheit, but we're going to hold it there for 20 minutes, give the steel a chance to normalize at that temperature. Then we're going to ramp it up again, full speed. We're going to get up to 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to hold it there for another 20 minutes. And then finally on the third ramp, we're going to ramp full speed up to our full temperature of 1975 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're going to hold it there for an hour. If you look online, you can go anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. I've been going the full hour there, and it seems to be working well for me. And then you can see I've got the same additional program down here for that extra 10 minutes. Same reason on the 440C, just gives me time to get a couple knives out of there and make sure it's still trying to hold temperature for that 5 or 10 minutes it takes for me to get the additional blades out of the oven. So that's our cooking temperature, our heat treatment temperatures for the CPM154. For tempering, this one is going to be very similar to what we did for the 440C. We're just going 50 degrees higher overall. So we're going to ramp full speed up to 350. Going to let that sit for 20 minutes to let the kiln normalize a little bit this time. So when I'm ramping at full speed, it's probably going to actually heat up to about 360, maybe a little above 360. And we're going to hold it there for 20 minutes. Gives our kiln a chance to get everything up to temperature, stabilize. And then we're going to slow that down and we're going to ramp up at 100 degrees per hour for the last up to 400 degrees. So it's going to take about 30 minutes or so to get up to temperature. And then we're going to hold that there for 2 hours for our tempering. And we're going to do this twice. Same thing. I'm going to put my blade in the freezer for several days before I do my first tempering. And sometimes I'll actually go and after I temper it the first time, I'm going to go put it in the freezer, let it sit in there for 2 or 3 days, and then come back before I do my second tempering. A lot of people do a cryo freeze using liquid nitrogen. I don't keep any of that on hand, so I'm just using my home freezer. And again, been having pretty good luck with this recipe for my CPM154. So let's go back down to the kiln. Let's get this programmed in here for our heat treatment, and let's go ahead and fire this blade. All right, so we just went through, looked at the recipe now for the CPM154. You've seen exactly how the kiln works now. You've got an idea for the programming. So I'm just gonna very quickly go through and show you what the program then looks like for heat treating and then for tempering of that CPM154. So same thing, we're gonna ramp hold program. This time I'm gonna do the user number 3 and I'm gonna hit enter. You're going to see we're going to be ramping at full, and this should be taking us to 1200, so that temperature should be 1200 degrees, and it's going to hold that for 20 minutes. We're going to get our ramp 2, again full speed. This should be 1400 degrees now, takes us to 1400, holds that for 20 minutes again, and then ramp 3, this is now going to be up to our full 1975. So that's going to get us up to our full temperature, and then we're going to hold it there for a full hour. Ramp 4, this is now my time to get additional blades out of here, so it's going to hold it full speed, holding it at that 1975, and it's going to do that for an additional 10 minutes. And then that's going to be the end of the program. So this ramp 5 now should be zeros and that tells it that my program can end. Again, you can have up to 10 steps in there on the programs for 2, 3, and 4. So I'm ending at step number 5, and I'm going to hit enter, and we will be back to idle. I just ran through that program. If I wanted to go ahead and fire that right now, I would just hit enter again, and that would start, and that would kick off that program. So for tempering the CPM154, I'm going to go into user number 4. I'm going to hit enter, and ramp number 1 is going to be full, but it's only going to be getting up to 350 degrees. And again, because it's ramping up full speed, the kiln's cold. It's actually going to blow past. When it would warm up, it would get up to probably about 360. That's why we're going to hold that there for 20 minutes, stabilize the kiln. Ramp number 2, we're going to do 100 degrees per hour instead of full, so only 100 degrees per hour is how quickly it's going to warm up. And then for this CPM 154, we're going to 400 degrees instead of the 350 like that 440C. We're going to hold that there for 2 hours again, and then ramp number 3 is going to be zeros, and our program is complete. So then that takes us back to idle. When we're tempering, we are running that cycle twice. So for heat treatment, you do that once. Tempering, you're gonna go ahead and do the tempering 2 different times. And like I say, I put mine in the freezer in between and afterwards. And that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and watch this thing fire, and let's heat treat a knife. And we got that turned on. Let's get this set in here. So I've got that lined up so that the center of my blade is about where the temperature sensor is in there, to make sure I'm going to get good temperature on that. And I've got enough room out here to be able to get the tongs. This is all just kind of empty pouch back here that's out close to the door. Get that standing nice and straight up, and again we've got the spine down on that. So let's get the door closed. So when I hit 4, it's going to tell me what user, and I want user number 3, so that's good. And then ramp 5 is at 0, meaning that's the end of my program. So I hit end, and I am back to idle. So from here, if I hit start, it's going to start our program, and it's going to start to fire. So the kiln is now going to work on trying to heat up and get to that first hold. I keep a logbook of all my firings. Looking at my last log, it went from 12:08 to 3:40, so right about 3.5 hours total time. So not a lot of excitement for the next 3.5 hours while that's warming up. You can already see we've gained 2 degrees here just in a minute, and it'll start to pick up here. It'll get up to the first couple hundred degrees fairly quickly, and then it slows down as it keeps getting hotter and hotter. All right, so here we go. Our timer's up. We're down to 0 minutes. So we're gonna get this out of here, and it's gonna be a pretty quick operation. Gonna come out, hold it in front of the fan, let it get so that it's below red hot before we open that pouch so we don't get oxidation on it. So once it's cooled down, we're gonna go down here, we'll cut that open, and then I'm gonna hang it on my nail. So let's have a look. See, that's glowing. Let's just get that low red. Keep it from sticking to the side. All right. And there we go. So it's not scaling up. It's nice and clean. There we go. Keep it from burning the wood up too much. And we got a good wind blowing right on that. And it'll cool off here in just about 3 or 4 minutes. Be a good looking blade. We'll be able to come back and clean that up and grind it up. While that blade is cooling down, you can see here is our little piece of paper that got burned up in there. So not much left of that. That's what burned up all the oxygen in the pouch. And I don't know why sometimes my pouches, usually they stay pretty thin, they burns up the oxygen and they just compress. I've noticed with this, with 440C, they almost always stay tight. With this CPM154, sometimes they puff up a little bit, and yet they have to be sealed, otherwise they would puff up and all that would just escape and get out of there. So I'm not sure what it is about these ones puffing up a little bit. Obviously, since we don't have any scale on there, that it stayed nice and oxygen free. How are we doing on temperature? All right, I can touch that now. It's just a little bit warm. But you can see on both sides of that, no scale. You know, you almost get a little bit of color to it there. Turns out well. The pouch seals up and, you know, that piece of paper burns up all your oxygen that's in there. Well, YouTube, that's a wrap on another video here in the BladesIIB shop. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have one of these Paragon kilns, if you're working on heat treating some knife blades, hope this gave you some information and I hope this helped you out. Until next time, I hope you're out in your own shop working on some projects of your own, making some chips of your own, making some blades of your own, whatever that case may be. We'll be here in the BladesIIB shop. We'll be working on that next video for you and look forward to seeing you soon. Until then, you take care.